raised $2.5 billion from the IFC. So 2018 has been a pretty long year. We've seen a lot unfold over the past 365 days. We've seen a lot happen in esports, startups, telecom, tech, so much more in the international arena. So what exactly happened? Well, here's our biggest moments from 2018. So kicking things off this year in 2018, in January, we saw that WSO2 became profitable for the first time in 12 years. And at the same time, they also became one of the largest open source companies in the world. So for all of you struggling entrepreneurs out there, yep, there is hope. And moving on, later we saw the government launch a simple website that would allow you to check if you were eligible to vote in the local government elections that were recently held. Sadly, this was the only government project in the year that we found was functional. The rest of the projects we saw were, how can I put this? An absolute travesty, to put it simply. We had the e-local government system, which was an utter horrible fail, poorly designed, and the sign-up process was, well, it was stupid basically. And then moving on from that, we had the open data initiative, which the government had hyped up once again this year. But as we saw, the data is still outdated, like it was when we first saw it at launch 4 years ago. And at that time, 4 years ago, the data was 4 years old already. So yeah, that open data initiative, 8-year-old data, not really worthwhile. And then of course we have the most recent initiative being a website launched by the police to help you track your phone. This we found wasn't pretty, but they admitted when we spoke to them that it's a work in progress, so we'll be hoping that this one turns out better. So looking at the local e-commerce scene, we saw Takas get on board a few new investors, and with that investment, we've seen them expand into new areas such as selling their own e-commerce management system. And just a few weeks back, they actually opened their own physical store in an attempt to be more accessible to customers. But moving on, when it comes to investments, we also saw PickMe raise $2.5 million from the IFC. Now with this investment, they've expanded their services into new areas, they've gotten into trucks, and they've also gotten into food delivery recently. But not to be outdone, Uber too has launched their own service of Tux in Colombo and also gotten into the food delivery game. How these services evolve going forward, of course, let's see in 2019. And on the topic of investments, we saw some high-profile ones being made internationally, especially in the form of acquisitions. We saw Microsoft acquire GitHub for $7.5 billion. And then we saw Walmart acquire Flipkart for $16 billion. Now, this last one, of course, recently hit a dent due to the Indian government adjusting regulations. How they'll adapt to that in 2019 is everyone's guess. But interestingly, internationally, we also saw that tech companies hitting that $1 trillion valuation. The first being Apple, which was soon followed by Amazon. Looking back at Sri Lanka now, this year we saw was a pretty big year for Sri Lankan esports. In 2018, esports was officially recognized by the National Olympic Committee, and we also formed a national esports team that took part in the Asian Games earlier this year. Now this team, we saw one athlete actually go on to bring us third place, the bronze medal at the League of Legends finals at the Asian Games. Now going forward at the next Asian Games, this will be a medal sport, so hopefully we'll see a stronger team take part in 2020. But also alongside that, we saw our usual events such as the Mercantile Esports Championship, the Inter-School Esports Championship, so on and so forth, along with Play Expo, which hosted the Sri Lankan National Cyber Games. And also we saw the in-game esports championship there as well, which was where we saw teams from across the region, from Maldives, India, Pakistan, all coming down to Sri Lanka and taking part. So needless to say, 2018 has been a big year for Sri Lankan esports. So alongside esports, game development in Sri Lanka has been taking off as well. So last year we saw it only being done by Arimac, which released the hit game Kanchayuddha. Granted, it wasn't a global hit success, but it was a very popular local hit, and we saw earlier this year that it's actually inspired other teams, other kids to actually get into game development. So earlier this year, we met with a team in Kandy called Codex, which is building a game based on Kumbio, the hit TV series. And then we also met another team from Ratnapura building a game called Unbroken. And then we also saw another team called Ram Studios building a game called Extraction Valley, which is being supported by CodeGen. So it's an interesting development to see that from that one game, we're seeing a whole other set of teams being inspired to build their own. And on top of that, Aramak, the guys who made Kanchyoda, they're also releasing another game in 2019 called Nero. So it looks like we'll have some interesting local games to look forward to in 2019. So as with every year, this year too, we covered a lot of events, and if I were to even just list a few of the most memorable ones we attended, I definitely have to put the Gaul IT Week and the Southern IT Weeks there, because that's where the entire IT industry went down south, and these events focused on reaching out to teachers and children to show them that IT is a viable career option. So alongside these IT weeks, we also saw a lot of startup weekends happening. This time the first one is in Kandy, Hikkadua, and then Batiklo, so on, so forth around the country. And interestingly, this year we saw it introduce the youth edition to Sri Lanka as well. So yeah, startup weekends, a lot of them happening. Then of course there's Disrupt Asia, the one event where we find so many stories to tell. And alongside that, of course, we have to list our friends at TEDx Colombo, one place we never fail to find some creative inspiration. So these are some of the bigger events we attended. Oh, almost what? Play Expo. Cannot forget Play Expo. Like we mentioned, it was a pretty big event this year, saw a lot of international teams coming down. So alongside these big events though, one thing that's still vibrant here in the local tech community is meetups, which is something we've been covering for the past 6 years, ever since we started ReadMe. So this year, of course, we also hosted a few of our own, where we hosted one with Startup X Foundry covering the entrepreneurship and ecosystem in Sri Lanka. We also hosted one recently with Colombo Cooperative, sharing with our tips and tricks on how to use digital media. So yeah, there's a lot of events in 2018.
So among all the events that happened this year, we also saw quite a bit of mid-range smartphones launching here in Sri Lanka. We saw Samsung come out with their new J series, we saw Huawei with their new Nova 3 series, and a bunch of other phones as well. But the beast came in the form of the Poco phone from Xiaomi, who actually launched here in Sri Lanka just a few months back. So what can you expect from smartphone manufacturers in 2019? Well, hopefully more mid-range smartphones that continue to get better and better. But for now, we just have to wait and see how things play out. 2018 was also the year we saw banks take a step towards fintech, and we already saw NTB launch their open banking API early in the year. Now that, along with FreeMe, means they have a strong offering on that front. Now, Commercial Bank also launched something similar called Flash. Now, along with Commercial Bank's offering, of course, we had People's Bank, who announced their vision towards digitization. Now, interestingly, we also saw companies like Dialog looking to enter into the fintech business. Now, Dialog actually acquired their banking license during the year. Now, that, along with their recent partnership with Alipay and ECommerce service, means that they are strongly looking at the fintech side of things. Now, looking at all this, will 2019 be finally the year where we see companies embrace fintech more aggressively? Well, we'll just have to wait and find out.
Ultimately, 2018 wasn't without its controversies. We saw in the middle of this year one such controversy takes place with Trace Expert City getting into a dispute with the railway department over its expansion plans. Now, we saw the expansion plan for Trace Expert City a while back, and we can tell you that the Trace Expert City you see there in Maradana today, that's not even close to the grand vision that's there. And hopefully in 2019, we'll see it move forward. But another controversy that was even more deadlier than this was the Digana riots. Now, in the Digana riots, we saw fake news spreading like viral, and this resulted in people being terrorized and even killed for that fake news. Now, the government did try to step in, and it decided to throw a sledgehammer at the problem. It decided to block Facebook and almost all of social media, and this didn't work. Basically, the only thing that happened was all of us decided, hey, you know what? Let's figure out how to use a VPN and spread our fake news. So that's what happened, and we dealt with this problem again. We dealt with fake news again 6 months after the Digana riots, not having learned anything when the political crisis began. So fake news, we are feeling it now, and globally this is becoming an even larger problem. And social networks, especially Facebook, don't seem to be doing too much about it. Sure, we're seeing Mark Zuckerberg apologize again and again, like after its security breaches and of course the issue with Cambridge Analytica. The thing is, with fake news and Cambridge Analytica and so on, we're going to be dealing with this going forward. In 2019, we are still going to be dealing with the ghosts of Cambridge Analytica, and it doesn't look like anybody has a clear answer to that. So 2018, really, it wasn't perfect. That's the truth. We are going to have some of its problems carrying forward in 2019. But to say that this was a bad year would be to ignore everything we just covered earlier in this video. It would be to ignore all the good that happened all these 365 past days. And really, at the end of the day, that's life, isn't it? You take the good with the bad, and then you try to make the world a better place. Happy New Year.